to create a beautiful and completely responsive form using HTML and CSS. On our left, we have our basic boilerplate and some basic HTML and CSS setup, and that's what you guys are seeing on the right side in our live server. If you have any questions about this so far, I do have a video explaining CSS and HTML much better. I'll leave a link to that. First, what we want to start with to create our form is going to be our div element. Inside our opening div tab, we do want to add a class called form container, and we're not going to do anything with this yet until we get later on in today's video, but make sure you add that for now. Now we're going to add our form element here, and it does have an opening and closing tag like you guys can see here, and inside of our form element is where we're going to put everything for our form, including inputs and our cancel and submit buttons. Now we're going to add the action attribute to our opening form tag, and for now we're not going to do anything with this. We're just going to leave it blank like I have here, but when we get to using JavaScript and PHP later on and actually taking this form data and doing something with it, you want to be in the habit of already adding these attributes. Now our method is going to be equal to post. Again, we're not going to get into this in today's video, but make sure you get in the habit of using these attributes. And now we're simply going to add an ID of form, and we will use that later on in today's video. Now we want to start by having a name input, and what we want to do is go ahead and start with our label element. And this label element is simply going to be the text describing what needs to be inputted for this form field. First and last name like this. And in our opening tag, we are going to do for equals name so we can actually attach this to our input field. You guys will see that our label is appearing. Now what we want to do is add an input so people can enter their name. And for the input element, it is going to be self-closing, meaning you only need to have this single tag like I have here. And now our type is going to be equal to text, which is going to make this a text input field. Now we want to have our ID equal to name because that's obviously what the input's going to be. And then we want to make our name equal to name just like so. Make sure you add all of these even if we're not going to use them in today's video necessarily, because when we do come back to this later and use JavaScript and PHP to actually manipulate and use the data from this form, you already want to have this set up and be in the habit of using these. And then lastly, at the end, we just want to add the required attribute just like so, and this is going to make sure that people fill this out. So it is going to be a required field like so. So now you guys can see there is a text input and you can input text like so. We want to add our little asterisk here so it actually shows people that yes, this is actually required, and there will be an error message if you don't fill this out that will say please fill out required field. Now we just want to copy and paste this. And now what we're going to start doing is actually start making our email input. So this is going to be for our email. And then we just want to change this text obviously to email because that's what we want the user to input. And now we're going to change all of these simply to email. Now we have our label, input, and all the attributes equal to email inside of that. This one, I don't want it to be required. Again, if you guys want it to be required, leave that attribute. And now we're going to go ahead and save to see what this looks like. And now you guys can see we have our first and last name input and our email input. Now we want to copy this one more time so we can create that phone number input. So I'm simply going to put phone here so I know what we're dealing with. And then the phone number is going to be a required field. So we're going to include required one more time like so we don't forget. And then we're going to change this to phone, and then we want the input type to actually be a telephone input, so we're going to change this to TEL or tel. And our ID is going to be tel again, and our name is going to be phone. And then now you guys can see we have our phone input. Now we're going to have our message input where customers can actually enter whatever message they want to leave for us. And instead of input, we're actually going to change this to a text area. And then a text area does have a closing tag, so make sure you add that at the end, just like so. And then again, we just want to change our for, type, ID, and name all to message. And now you guys can see we have all of our input fields on the right, and now we need to actually create our buttons. So back in our HTML, we're going to start creating our buttons with our button element, and now it's going to have a opening and closing tag, and this is going to be our cancel button, so we're going to go ahead and specify that. And our type is going to be equal to reset, because when you click this button, we want it to actually reset the form data. And then our value is going to be reset as well. And then we want our name to be cancel. And then we want to copy this and paste it right below that, because we want to also have our submit button here. So we're going to change this text to submit. And then our type, we want to change this to submit as well. And then our value, we want to change it to confirm. And then our name is simply going to be submit again. And now you guys can see we have all of our inputs and our cancel and submit button here. So now what we want to do is actually start styling this page. So we want to start off with our form container, which again, if you guys forgot, is the div that is surrounding our form element right here down below. We're going to change the width to 60% because we want it to take up 60% of our page. And then our margin is going to be auto because we want it to be right in the center. And now we want to have padding on the inside of our container of 4 rem, so everything's not right on top of each other. And then we're going to have a border of 2 pixels. We want it to be solid. And then I'm going to use this specific color right here. Feel free to use the exact same color, or you guys can select whatever color you want to use here. And then we want to change our border radius because we want it to be a little bit rounded off on the corners. So we're going to change that to 1 rem, and then we're going to save, and now everything is going to be inside of our container just like we styled it. Now we're going to target each one of our input fields, and the way to do this is by typing input and a square bracket like I have here, and then type, and then we're going to make that equal to text. And then we're going to do this same exact thing separated by a comma for each one of our inputs. Now you guys can see I have one for my text input, my tell input, and my email input. Now we want to also include our text area, so we're going to type text area, and we're going to do type equal to message, like so. And again, make sure each one is separated by a comma. And then we're going to put our normal CSS brackets. And then we want our width to be 100% because we want our inputs to take up 100% of our container. Then we want the height to be 2 rem so people have plenty of space to type in and actually see what they're doing. Then we want to change our display to block. Now we're going to change our border here again to be 0.1 rem, solid, and then black. Now we want our background to be white, and let's preview that here. So now you guys can see everything looks a lot prettier and everything is in the exact location where we want it. Now we're going to add a property called box shadow, and what this is going to do, it's going to be 0.2 rems all the way around except for the ending here. And then we're going to have an RGB value, which is our first 3 values, and then our last one is going to be the opacity. Now you guys can see that lightly colored background color that we have behind each one of our inputs that adds just a little bit of depth and a lot more design and feel to our form here. Now we want to change our margin to 1.5 rem because we don't want everything to be right on top of each other. And then our second margin property, we just want to have it at 0. Now you guys can see everything's spaced out a lot better and they're not jumbled right on top of each other. Standard color for the input fields is going to be black, but we want to specify it over here anyways to avoid any potential issues. And lastly, we don't want our input fields to be so square, so we're going to add a border radius property of 0.5 rem, like so. And now you guys can see our input fields are rounded off a little bit and it looks much better. Now we want to go ahead and actually target our buttons like so here. You can add a class or just target the button specifically like I'm doing here. And we're going to add our custom background color that we want here, and then we can go ahead and preview this. And now you guys can see our background color is there. And then we don't want a border, so we want to change this to none. And then we want this to be curved off on the edges a little bit, so we're going to once again and add a border radius of 2 rem. Then we're going to add some padding to enlarge our buttons just a little bit. Our padding is going to be 1 rem followed by 3 rem. And now we want to enlarge our font size just a little bit up to 1.5 rem. And now you guys can see we have our entire form, but when you hover over the buttons, there's nothing going on with your cursor, so that's going to be the last thing that we add. We're going to specify our button again, followed by a colon and hover. So when we hover over this, it actually changes our cursor. And to specify that, we're going to change this to cursor, and then we're going to make it a pointer. And now you guys can see when we hover over our buttons, it's actually going to change our cursor. And so now we're actually going to test it out. So if you hit submit, it's going to ask you, please fill out this field, because we want our essential fields filled out, right? So once you fill this out and then you go ahead and click submit, it's going to say this page isn't working. It's just we're not actually sending our form data anywhere or doing anything with it yet. We will do that in a later video. What you want to do is close out of that tab and then open in your live server or default browser again, and it will be refreshed. If you want to keep it from doing that while you're actually working on the form, what you want to do is add the prevent default function in JavaScript by typing document.getElementById and grab your form ID and then add event listener, and then on click we want it to trigger an event, so that's why we have function event, and then simply we just want event.prevent default. And what this is going to do is it's going to prevent the default action from happening before we actually add any PHP or JavaScript to actually do something with this form data. We'll go into JavaScript a little bit more later, but for now, all you guys need to know is that this is going to prevent the default action. And later on, we will actually be sending this form data somewhere using this exact form that we built here using JavaScript and PHP. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. If you have any questions today, please reach out to us through this video or go to our website at kalmanwebdesign.com and we will help you out. Thanks for watching.